What are some of the ways to investigate a person with whom you are considering going into business?
Well, I think that there's so much information available these days that ignoring the various sources that we have would be a big mistake. A lot of times I tell people if they're going to go into partnership with somebody or they're going to sign a contract with somebody that using some of the search engines on the internet, such as Google or the others, that getting references from the people they're going to work with makes sense. Going to a website, if the company or the individual has a personal listing at a website, I believe that makes a lot of sense. Asking the person with whom you're going to work about themselves. Ask them about other business arrangements they've had, other people they've been in partnership with, and find those things out. If a person is licensed, if they're a contractor, if they're a lawyer, if they are a doctor, there's a lot of information available. Anybody who's licensed, usually there's a website you can go to if they're a doctor, a lawyer, a contractor, which sometimes has if there's been disciplinary action against that person, if there have been judgments against them. Some of the publicly available databases such as Lexis have judgment information. They have public record information such as trust deeds. All of those things give you a fairly good picture about what the assets are of somebody you're going to be working with and who they are, because in essence, anytime you're going to work with somebody, you're extending credit to them or hoping that they're going to do what they say they're going to do.
Jonathan, in putting together a business where there is an individual other than a sole proprietor, so the business organization will require handling multiple parties and interest, what are some of the documents that a client should consider addressing with their lawyer?
Well, I think that if you're going to enter into any sort of a business arrangement, you should have a written agreement. And one of the interesting things that I learned when I was speaking to some Japanese businessmen once was that what they informed me was that actually written agreements from their cultural perspective were agreements which were more often ones from which they were trying to get relief rather than a sign of a serious agreement. That the way they described it to me, that a written agreement was something you would try and get out of, whereas an oral agreement would have honor associated with it and you would try and stick to it. That's contrary to our Western concept, which is if it's important, you put it in writing. Some of the documents I think are important are, if it's a partnership, a written partnership agreement. If you go to open a bank account in the name of a partnership, the bank will usually ask for the written partnership agreement so that they know. That agreement often talks about who has the ability to write checks for the business, who has the ability to bind the business. If it's going to be a limited liability company under California law, you usually have an operating agreement, and that's part of the package that you put together. If it's a small corporation under California law, you usually have bylaws and articles, which are part of what control the form of the business and how the business is going to be operated. Oftentimes, if you have a number of principals in a small business, you often have what's called a buy-sell agreement, which is an agreement that provides that in the event of the disability or death of one of the parties, that the stock or ownership shares of the other person, that they'll be purchased by the remaining person. And the reason for doing that ahead of time is because oftentimes there's a question about what the value of that ownership share is, and the agreement can provide a formula for determining that.